Steve Barclay is the Conservative MP for North West Cambridgeshire. You're going to the funeral today, Stephen?
I am in.
Should we just be paying our respects today and remembering a lady who ruled this country for a lot of years, the first woman Prime Minister, and for a lot of people did a lot of good things? Is that how we should be remembering the day, or do we need to take into account that she had a Marmite nature about her?
Absolutely, we should be remembering the day that way. She is a truly historic national figure, our first and only female Prime Minister, the longest-serving 20th century Prime Minister. And I think it is fitting that we pay our respects to her today, and also respect her family as well, because her family will be there, and I think it's very undignified to have some of the comments and protests that we've heard in recent days.
Should there be a different day for things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, clearly the changes she pushed through caused some controversy, but deindustrialisation was going to happen. She confronted that reality head-on. In 13 years, Labour didn't choose to reopen the pits. In fact, if you look at the agreements they signed, actually was to move away from coal and dirty technology. So the idea that these changes weren't going to happen is just a myth. And in fact, many of those protesting against Lady Thatcher were not even alive at the time that she was in power.
I mean, I grew up in mining villages in South Yorkshire at the time, and I've mentioned this a few times before. At the time, she was seen as the Antichrist, but you're saying she was just the person with the morals and the drive to drive something through that needed to be done.
Yeah, she accepted that change was inevitable and confronted that, and as a result positioned the country far better as a result. And if you look elsewhere, these changes happened, but Britain, by confronting them earlier, positioned ourselves far better. And so she confronted that reality. But the key legacy of Margaret Thatcher was her willingness to give people freedom from the state, to actually empower the individual, and to take on vested interests. And she did that not just the vested interests from the bullying trade unions that had held the country to ransom and had defeated Callaghan and Ted Heath, but she also took on vested interests elsewhere. For example, the city was seen as more of a conservative institution, and yet she took on the vested interest in the city. She took on the vested interest in her own party, the patricians within the Conservative Party. So she was someone who would take on vested interests, not just in the coal pits, but wherever they got in the way of actually giving people freedom from the state, and that's really her true legacy.
You could compare the quality of the funeral that is being given today with that of Winston Churchill, really, can't you? I mean, should she be on a level like that?
Well, I think if you look around the world, I mean, President Obama cites her to his own children as an example that girls can achieve the very top. Throughout Russia and behind the Iron Curtain, she's a figure of great historic significance for the way she defended people, the individual against the state. She is a global figure, and I think that's really reflected in both the length of time she was in office, the first female leader, and I think that's really reflected in the service that we will have today.
Nevertheless, some people are very uneasy about the fact that this funeral is costing so much money and so much from the taxpayer's pocket when times are so tough.
Well, if you look at, she was advised that we wouldn't get the rebate from Europe. Actually, her dogged determination actually so far secured us £75 billion in terms of our rebate.
Are you trying to say the funeral is paying for itself?
I'm just saying we need to put these things in perspective. I mean, people, I think, forget what a mess the country was in when she came to power. We'd had the winter of discontent, the 3-day week, the unions were holding government to ransom, and she restored sort of the pride in the country. We saw that with the Falklands, our national sovereignty. And the ethos of the time was that all we could do was manage decline. And actually she put the country back on its feet. And I think that's really the context. People forget the absolute mess. Labour once again had spent all the money. And the country was on its knees, and she restored that national pride to the country.
Managing decline, Stephen? Comparable to today, isn't it?
Well, I mean, once again, we've had a Labour government that spent all the money and we're having to clear up the mess. So there are parallels between then and now. Clearly, the position of the unions is different, although they're back on the right, on the march, but very different to where they were in the 70s. But yes, there are parallels between then and now in terms of a Conservative government having to come in and clear up the mess that we've inherited.
But you see my point, when times are so tough, we could have saved a bit of money here, couldn't we?
Well, as I say, I think we've got to put it in context. This is Lady Thatcher was a historic national figure, and I think it is fitting that is recognised, and the legacy and the change that she delivered for the country is recognised today.
And today, an historic day that will be remembered forever, do you think?
I think it is a historic day. I think a lot of people want to go and pay their respects. I was in the House of Commons yesterday when Lady Thatcher's coffin was in the chapel, and it was quite moving. The number of colleagues, and not just colleagues, the policemen in the Commons, the staff, the catering staff, the number of people from all walks of life that you saw going down to the chapel just to take a few minutes just to reflect and to pay their respects, and to see people from across the House of Commons in terms of people in all sorts of jobs just popping down to pay their respects was actually very moving.
Stephen, thank you for that. Thank you for coming on this morning. Steve Barclay, Conservative MP for North West Cambridgeshire, going to the funeral today.